The most tragic deaths in pop star history. The brighter the spotlight on that stage, the darker the shadow when they fall. Today, I'm taking you through the final moments of 10 of the biggest stars who ever lived. 1. Liam Payne. The 16th of October, 2024. Buenos Aires, Argentina. 31-year-old Liam Payne checked into a luxury hotel. He was once a core member of One Direction, one of the biggest boy bands ever seen. The kind of fame and fortune most people couldn't even dream of. He'd come to Argentina to watch a former bandmate's concert, a trip down memory lane. Nobody could have known it would be the last trip he'd ever take. That afternoon, hotel staff noticed something was seriously wrong. He was out of control, completely unreachable. Around 5 p.m., the hotel manager picked up the phone and called the police, hands shaking. The recording later went public. You could hear the panic in his voice as he described a guest on the third floor who had completely lost it. Drunk, high, destroying everything in the room, and that room had an open balcony. The manager was terrified of what might happen next. A few minutes after that call ended, at exactly 5:07 p.m., a heavy, hollow thud echoed through the hotel's interior courtyard. Liam Payne had fallen from the third-floor balcony. He hit the ground hard. By the time paramedics arrived, there was nothing left to do. The fall had caused fatal multiple trauma injuries. He was pronounced dead at the scene. When police pushed open the door to his room, what they found stopped everyone cold. The TV was smashed, and a half-empty bottle of champagne was sitting on the table. Aluminum foil, white powder, and drug paraphernalia were scattered across the floor. Police ruled out foul play. The toxicology report later confirmed a lethal combination of multiple substances in his system. The tragedy exploded across the internet within hours, but beyond the tears, it left the world with a haunting question. When the cameras turn off and the applause dies down, just how desperate does a superstar get when they're drowning in addiction alone? 2. Michael Jackson. If Liam's death was a tragedy of losing control, what happened to the king of pop was something closer to a medically sanctioned catastrophe. The 25th of June, 2009, Los Angeles, California. Michael Jackson was at his rented mansion, deep in preparations for his massive comeback tour. This is it. Chronic insomnia had been haunting him for years. To get any sleep at all, he hired a personal physician named Dr. Conrad Murray, paying him a reported $150,000 a month. Every day, Murray would hook up an IV and slowly push a white liquid into Jackson's veins. Jackson had a nickname for it. He called it his milk. But it wasn't milk. It was propofol, a powerful general anesthetic used in major surgeries to render patients completely unconscious under the knife. Murray had been doing this every single night for weeks, in a regular bedroom with zero professional monitoring equipment, leaving a man who had just been put under general anesthesia completely alone. That is not medical care, that is negligence at best, and something far worse at worst. That day, Murray administered the propofol along with several other sedatives. He watched Jackson's eyes slowly close, and then left the room to make a phone call. When he came back, Jackson wasn't breathing. Murray frantically attempted CPR and called for help, but the window to save him had already closed. An ambulance rushed Jackson to the hospital, where a team of doctors worked on him for over an hour. At 2:26 p.m., Michael Jackson was pronounced dead from acute propofol intoxication, leading to cardiac arrest. The moment the news broke, the internet collapsed. Twitter went down, Wikipedia crashed, and messaging platforms around the world went dark simultaneously. Murray was later convicted of involuntary manslaughter, but none of it brought back the king of pop. The man who had everything, the talent, the fame, the wealth, had to undergo the equivalent of full surgical anesthesia every single night just to fall asleep in his own bed. That was the price of being a god. 3. Lisa Left Eye Lopes. The 25th of April, 2002, Honduras. Grammy-winning TLC member Lisa Lopes, known to the world as Left Eye, was behind the wheel of an SUV. She was driving down a Honduran highway. She'd come to film a documentary about self-discovery and spiritual healing. A camera mounted in the front seat had been rolling the whole time, capturing everything. Without warning, a car appeared directly in her lane. She yanked the wheel to avoid it. The heavy SUV immediately lost control and began to roll. Everyone else in the vehicle survived with injuries. Lisa, in the driver's seat, suffered fatal trauma to her head and neck. She was 30 years old. The camera recorded every second of it. But the part that really sends a chill down your spine isn't the crash itself. It is what happened in the weeks before it. A van Lisa was riding in had accidentally struck and killed a 10-year-old boy on those same Honduran streets. She covered all the funeral expenses herself and went personally to comfort the boy's family. But in her final recorded conversations, her voice was trembling. She said she felt like something dark was following her, that the boy's death had been a warning from death itself. A few weeks later, on that same stretch of land, death showed up to collect. 4. Aaliyah. The 25th of August, 2001, the Bahamas. 22-year-old Aaliyah had just wrapped the music video for her new single on a beautiful Bahamian beach. She and her team were eager to get back to Florida. They chartered a small twin-engine Cessna. The seeds of disaster were planted during the baggage loading. Days' worth of heavy production equipment got crammed into that tiny plane. At 6:45 p.m., Aaliyah and 8 others boarded. The engines roared as the plane began its takeoff roll. When it finally lifted off the runway, it crashed. It moved like a tightrope walker, carrying 1,000 pounds, struggling to climb. Fighting gravity the whole way, just seconds after liftoff, only 200 feet from the end of the runway, the plane slammed back into the earth and erupted into a massive fireball, with all 9 people on board killed. The investigation report read like an indictment. The plane was carrying 700 pounds, more than its maximum load capacity. The pilot had cocaine and a high concentration of alcohol in his system. His license to fly that aircraft, it was forged. A dangerously overloaded plane, a drunk, high, unlicensed pilot, every single deadly factor lined up perfectly in one moment. Aaliyah had just finished filming the Matrix sequels. She was at the absolute peak of her career. If even one person had said, "Let's just take a bigger plane tomorrow," none of this would have happened. 5. Randy Rhoads. The 19th of March, 1982, in Leesburg, Florida. Guitar prodigy Randy Rhoads was on tour with rock legend Ozzy Osbourne across Florida. He was widely considered one of the greatest guitarists of his generation. The man who almost single-handedly rescued Ozzy's solo career from the brink of collapse. That morning, the tour bus was parked overnight at a property belonging to their driver, Andrew Aycock. While the band slept, Aycock spotted a small plane parked nearby. He decided it would be fun to take people up for a joyride. His pilot's license had long since expired, and he had done a significant amount of cocaine the night before. Randy was notoriously afraid of flying, but that morning, for reasons no one can explain, he agreed to get on the plane. Once airborne, Aycock had an idea he thought was hilarious. He would buzz the tour bus at low altitude and use the engine noise to scare everyone awake. The first pass wasn't exciting enough for him, so he circled around and dove again. This time, he flew too low, and the left wing clipped the roof of the tour bus. The impact instantly destroyed the plane's aerodynamics. It spun out of control and plowed into a mansion. The explosion was immediate, and all 3 people on board were incinerated on impact. There was no time to scream, no time to react. Ozzy was jolted awake by the sound of the crash. He ran outside to find the sky lit up with fire and wreckage scattered across the ground. A musician who was genuinely expected to change the course of rock history didn't die from drugs. He didn't die from some rock and roll excess. He died because a drug-addled bus driver thought it would be funny. 6. Sophie. The 30th of January, 2021, in Athens, Greece. 34-year-old music producer, Sophie was living on the 3rd floor of an apartment building. The Scottish-born artist was one of the most groundbreaking figures in experimental pop music. A genre pioneer who had produced iconic tracks for artists, including Madonna. At 4 a.m., with the entire city asleep, Sophie climbed up to the roof of her building alone, camera in hand. The night sky was stunning, a full moon hanging over Athens, impossibly bright and clear. She wanted to capture it. She stepped back slowly, looking through the viewfinder, searching for the perfect angle. Her foot slipped. She fell from the rooftop, 3 stories, and hit the ground below. She was rushed to the hospital, but the trauma was too severe. She didn't survive. No drugs in her system, no violence involved. She just wanted to photograph something beautiful. And the night swallowed her whole. 7. Richie Valens. The 3rd of February, 1959. The Midwest. 17-year-old Richie Valens was in the middle of a brutal winter tour across the frozen heartland of America. He'd been in the music industry for less than 8 months, but had already become a nationwide sensation on the strength of just a few songs. That winter was merciless. The whole crew was jammed into an unheated bus, grinding through icy roads in the dead of night. After one particularly exhausting show, headliner Buddy Holly had had enough. He paid out of pocket to charter a small plane to fly a few of the core acts directly to the next stop. But the seats were limited. Richie wanted one of those seats badly. So did guitarist Tommy Allsup. Neither would back down. They decided to flip a coin. The coin tumbled through the air. It hit the ground. Richie had won. He lit up like a kid on Christmas morning, grabbed his bags, and ran toward the plane. "That is the first time I've ever won anything in my life," he shouted. In the early hours of the morning, the plane took off into a blizzard. Minutes later, the pilot lost all spatial orientation in the whiteout conditions. The plane nosedived into a frozen cornfield in Iowa. All 4 people on board died on impact. That date was later immortalized in pop culture as the day the music died. Don McLean wrote an entire song about it, American Pie, as a tribute to the tragedy. The first thing Richie Valens ever won in his life was a one-way ticket to his death. And Tommy Allsup, the guy who lost the coin flip, went back to the bus that night and lived for another 58 years. 8. Elvis Presley, the 16th of August, 1977, Memphis, Tennessee. 42-year-old Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was at his Graceland mansion. Years of prescription drug addiction had left his body in near total collapse. He could barely get through a full concert anymore. That afternoon, he walked into his bathroom alone. Hours passed. Nothing. At around 2:30 p.m., his girlfriend pushed the door open and let out a scream. Elvis was face down on the bathroom carpet, completely unresponsive. The staff attempted CPR. He was rushed to the hospital. At 3:30 p.m., he was officially pronounced dead. The public was told it was a heart attack, but the autopsy told a different story. His colon had swollen to twice the normal size. Chronic, severe constipation, the result of years of consuming opioid painkillers, like candy. At the time of his death, he had been sitting on the toilet, straining with everything he had. That extreme physical effort, known medically as the Valsalva maneuver, triggered a fatal cardiac arrhythmia. The king of rock and roll died on his own toilet, straining to have a bowel movement. The toxicology report was even more disturbing. His personal physician had prescribed him tens of thousands of pills over the preceding months. Fans gathered outside Graceland and wept, and the world mourned a legend taken too soon. But the truth was far less poetic. He had spent years slowly strangling himself in a swamp of prescription drugs, one pill at a time. 9. Whitney Houston, the 11th of February, 2012, Beverly Hills, California. 48-year-old Whitney Houston checked into the Beverly Hilton Hotel. Downstairs, one of the biggest Grammy weekend properties in Hollywood was being set up. It was thrown by Clive Davis, the music mogul who had discovered her and launched her into superstardom. At around 3:30 p.m., Whitney drew herself a bath in her 4th-floor suite. The water was scalding hot, hot enough to blister normal skin on contact. But her body was flooded with cocaine and prescription drugs. The chemicals had completely numbed her senses. She sank into the burning water and felt nothing. The drugs pulled her under, and she lost consciousness in the tub. Her body slipped below the surface, and when her assistant walked in, it was already too late. The coroner ruled the cause of death as accidental drowning. Cocaine intoxication and heart disease were listed as contributing factors. But what happened next is what made the world go cold. Hours after Whitney's body was zipped into a bag and removed, the party downstairs went on. The lights were blazing, and the music was deafening. Clive Davis took the microphone, offered a brief acknowledgement of Whitney's passing, and then announced, "The party will continue." Celebrities in designer gowns clinked champagne glasses on the dance floor. Laughter echoed through the ballroom. And just a few floors above them, the greatest voice the world had ever heard had just drowned. In Hollywood, they say people move on fast. That night, they didn't even wait for the body to leave the building. 10. Prince, the 21st of April, 2016, Chanhassen, Minnesota. Staff members at Paisley Park, Prince's private estate and recording complex, found a body slumped in an elevator. At 10:07 a.m., the 57-year-old music icon was pronounced dead. Just days earlier, he had been on stage performing with full energy. No one saw it coming. As investigators dug deeper, a terrifying truth emerged. Decades of performing in high heels, jumping and dancing had destroyed Prince's hips. This left him in chronic, debilitating pain that never went away. To function, He had been relying heavily on painkillers. But when the medical examiner ran his blood, it was a mess. They found something that stopped everyone in their tracks. The fentanyl concentration in his system was off the charts. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, 50 times more potent than heroin. A dose, the size of a few grains of salt, can kill a person. When investigators searched Paisley Park, the pill bottles they found weren't what they appeared to be. What looked like ordinary prescription painkillers were actually counterfeit pills from the black market, pressed by dealers to look exactly like the real thing, but laced with lethal doses of fentanyl. Prince thought he was taking his regular pain medication. He had no idea he was swallowing a bomb. He didn't die from recklessness. He didn't die from excess. He was murdered by a vast, faceless, black market drug network, and became the most high-profile victim of America's fentanyl crisis. To make it even more painful, this billionaire music legend left no will. His death was so sudden, so unexpected, that he never got around to it. What followed was years of brutal, ugly courtroom battles, as relatives and strangers fought over everything he left behind. A fall from a balcony, a bathtub, a plane crash, a counterfeit pill. These were people who had everything the world had to offer. And in the end, death didn't care. Their stories are tragedies, but they're also warnings. Written in the only ink that never fades. Which one hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments. We'll see you next time.